Shalom, 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 everybody. How you doing? Welcome back to Reading with SHILO. We are back at it, man. Come on in, tell a friend, sit yourself down before we begin. We back at it to get the next chapter or the next session of chapter 6. The next section of chapter 6, which is section 3. Section 3 of chapter 6 on the real side by Mr. Mel Watkins, A History of African American Comedy from Slavery to Chris Rock. Shalom, shalom, spiritual conversations. How you doing tonight? Welcome, welcome, welcome. We in here. We in here trying to get section 3 together tonight. Section 3 of chapter 6, man. We have 3 more sections. 3 more sections. Glad that you're doing well. Glad that you're doing well. Yeah, 3 sections, 3 more sections. Now I know I should go get this water right now. Give me a second. Let me go grab this water right quick, man. I'll be right back. Oh man. Come on and roll with me. All right. So that way I gotta move later. I was gonna be mad. I should have grabbed it before I started the live. But let's get into it. The New Negro, chapter 6, section 3. The New Negro. Let me see what else it was. The New Negro, Harlem and Hollywood, exotics, imposters, and other mishappen identities. Move some stuff out the way so I can have more room to play. That look better. All right, everything we need. Section 3. Put this book over there too, just in case we're going to need that one. Section 3. Section 3. This one's going to be pretty. It's going to be about an hour. It's going to be about an hour read. I don't know if you're going to be in here the whole time, sis. But if you are, we're going to push through it. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 pages. 7 pages. So we're going to push through these 7 pages tonight. That'll be a comeback tomorrow with section 4. 4, then 5, then 6. Section 3. Section 3 of On the Real Side, chapter 6. Chapter 6. But Hollywood's screen image of adult blacks showed fewer signs of improvement. In the late 20s, Paramount was the first studio to produce an adult black comedy series for sound movies. Headed by Al Christine, it became known as the Christine Comedies and set out to adapt Octavius Roy Cohen's coarse comic tales of black life in urban Alabama. And for the first time, a black advisor would have significant input. The comedian Spencer Williams was retained as a consultant, continuity writer, and performer. Word of the impending project was greeted with elation and optimism by the black community. But if Cohen's track record in films or his reputation as a Southern regionalist writer committed to derisive minstrel-like dialect humor had been closely examined, their enthusiasm might have been tempered. Advertised as a Negro's O. Henry, Cohen had staked an early claim as one of the premier white expositors of Black life and culture. Although he first published in the early 20th century, his fiction was a pedestrian derivative of the works of the 19th century misspellers such as Artemus Ward. Cohen, however, like Hugh Wiley, opportunistically created an insular, let's see what that is, INSULR, insular INSULAR, insular, created an insular fictional world where blacks were the sole focus of his crude satire. Insular. 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 It's not in here. But I see insulator. Insular. Let's look it up. Shit. INSULAR. Insular. That's what I think it is. Insular.
Insular.
All right. Insular. Ignorant of or uninterested in cultures, ideas, or people outside one's own experience. He created a ignorant fictional or uninterested in cultural fictional world where blacks were the sole focus of his crude satire. Insular. The plots of his stories are derived from jokes that rely for their effect on the comic caricature of the Negro, wrote the literary critic Sylvia Wallace Holton. In his work, black characters are presented as pretentious and impressed by Borgia's material values. Their greatest pleasure in their pursuit of material riches is to outwit one another. I could believe that. Ultimately, the characters are rendered ridiculous by their names, their values, and their misuse of language. All of them come off badly. By the mid 20s, he and other literary Ethiopian delineators had secured an inflated reputation as the Negro's realistic chroniclers, just as their minstrel predecessors had done in the mid 19th century. Belatedly and ironically, Carl van Vechten warned of such a situation in his novel Nigger Heaven in 1926, when one character says, "If you, young Negro intellectuals, don't get busy, a new crop of Nordics is going to spring up who will take the trouble to become better informed and will exploit this material before the Negro gets around to it." Someone should have issued that caveat earlier. At the highest or the height of his career, E.K. Means, much like Cohen, was hailed as the writer of Negro stories. Publishers, advertisements extolled Means' ability to capture blacks' picturesque idiom of speech and his perfect comprehension of the Negro's turn of thought, his love of laughter, his shiftlessness, his love of music, his superstition. Collected stories by Means, a rural Louisiana pastor, were conspired as so unique and authentically black that they needed no title other than the author's name. His comic tales about quaint, superstitious rural blacks were published simply as E.K. Means in 1918, and further E.K. Means in 1920. Cohen and other Southern humorists specializing in black caricature were not new to the Hollywood scene. At least one Dixon movie, The Custard Nine in 1911, was shot on location in Vicksburg, Mississippi, and, unlike most films of the time, used black performers. Tom Fletcher, as an actor in Dixon's company, recalled that residents were not pleased when the Pullman car led by with black actors arrived in Vicksburg. So these niggas, a local reportedly said, they came down here on a Pullman car just like white folks, but you can bet a fat penny they won't go back in one. The easy camaraderie of the mixed company infuriated locals, and Dixon, while entertaining at its country club, was reportedly rebuffed by another member who told him that he didn't shake hands with any white man who called the nigger mister. But for all his apparent sympathy, Dixon's The Custard Nine was just another invidious farce that wrung laughter from its dialect jokes and portrait of a conniving, bumbling, southern black dandy, Virgil Custard, a member of Darktown's 400, who leads a traveling baseball team through a series of slapstick misadventures. Hugh Wiley, like Dixon and Cohen, intentionally published many of his short stories, in the Saturday Evening Post. The collected tales, Wildcat in 1920 and 4 Meals a Day in 1927, centered on one of the black coon figures, J. Vitus Marsden, who was the Wildcat of the title. Expectedly, pretentious malaprop and dialect speech, crap shooting and carousing, and outrageous, ill advised schemes were the prominent comic ingredients. Wiley's stories became so popular during the 20s that J. Victus Marsden, along with the Coen's character, Florian Slappy, became household names, ranking with Sambo, Uncle Tom, Aunt Jemima, Rastus, Snowflake, and Topsy as the most visible and familiar symbols of blacks to most mainstream Americans. Consequently, around 1929, when Path Studios initiated a series of films intended to compete with Paramount's Christie's comedies, they turned to Wiley's tales. They too enlisted black assistants and ambiguous black filmmaker and promoter Bill Foster, who had produced a number of silent films, including The Railroad Reporter in 1912 and the controversial Florida Crackers Circus of 1915, which contained a graphic lynching scene, and the black vaudeville song and dance team Buck and Bubbles, Ford Lee Washington, and John Sublette. Path cranked out black cast comedies, shorts such as In and Out, Foul Play, Darktown Blues, and Honest Crooks. Most of these two-reelers have not survived, but according to Thomas Cripps, the plots hung on the threats of jail, higher yelling mama, and other stock situations. Still, Buck and Bubbles occasionally managed to introduce some less brazenly stereotyped material. In addition to their considerable talent of performers, they had, by their very presence, Cripps suggested, imposed black themes and situations on the white man's screens. Spencer Williams, a witty writer and comedian who would later produce his own films and star as Andy in the television versions of Amos and Andy, faced a familiar task as a performer and writer for the Christie comedy series. As a humorist, Cohen had built a considerable reputation exploiting the image of the minstrel stage Negro and burlesquing urban Alabama blacks. Among other projects, from 1926 to 1927, He had produced a silent comedy series based on his stories, which featured the derisive coon character Florian Slappy. Except for the new sound technology and the presence of Spencer Williams, the Christie comedies would offer more of the same low racial buffoonery offered in the Florian Slappy series. The following exchange between a black couple, Anophiles Ricketts and his wife Clarisse, from the auto intoxication, a short story that paired in the 1921 collection Highly Colored, is representative of Cohan's least offensive dialect humor. I declare to goodness gracious, Clarisse, he marked irritably, automobiles is the one thing you don't talk about nothing else but. Clarisse pouted. We has got money enough to buy us a car, honey. Lots of folks which ain't got us much as what we has got is got automobiles. Yeah, reckon they is. And lots of folks has got bills which you ain't paid, but we ain't. You just quit talking with your mouth button automobiles. Twain Gwain get you nowheres, and I could have had an automobile, flared Clarisse suddenly. I sure could if I had 90 horsepower, Conley, Detroit, if in I had of a choice. Man. Transferred to the screen, this type of material was perfectly suited to Hollywood's knee-jerk, one-dimensional projection of conniving, untutored, inept darkies, futility attempting to mimic white manners and mores. The plots of most Coen stories intensified the insult by focusing on Birmingham's middle class. The saucity blacks, and depicting them as pretentious, rural buffoons. Brown Gravy in 1929, for instance, opens with the traditional scene. A black choir sings, "Every time I feel the spirit," and Joshua fit the battle of Jericho as they practice for a choral contest. The film then moves through a threadbare plot that ridiculous black matriarchal relationships, religions, con men, and fraternal organizations, the knights and ladies of the better world. In one scene, a black pastor has a following conversation with the leader of the choir. We is the singingest choir in the whole country. I sorry that to have to move you downstairs in my piano parlor when I has my big spiritual lipstick meeting up here tonight. That's all right, Professor Clemens. The place that you have downstairs is plenty big enough for the choir to practice in. Well, now, I's only gonna move you down there just for the night. That there parlor is the biggest piano parlor in the country. Come and look at it. I was wanting to see it. Other Christie comedies were equally disparaging, framing the shrew featured Evelyn Prier as a obstreperous, that's a word, obstreperous OB Streperous, obstreperous. I think that's it. Obstreperous. Obstreperous. Obstreperous.
Obstreperous.
Obstreperous. Noisy and difficult to control. The boy is cocky and obstreperous. Obstreperous. Framing of the shrew featured Evelyn Peer is an obstreperous, nagging black woman who ultimately gets her comeuppance from her timid husband. The part is that of the classic domineering mammy. Set in the same cabaret, music hath charms and melancholy dame both deal with petty, jealous, and mistaken rivalries amongst the owner, his employees, and his paramours. Slapstick, broken English, and egregious portraits of inept blacks prevail in each of these 1929 two-reelers. Contributions by Spencer Williams were were relegated contributions by Spencer Williams were relegated to moderating Cohan's minstrel caricatures, as he continued to do throughout most of his career with the Christie comedies. Williams struggled to squeeze honest black roles into the crevices of white movies. Still, Hollywood was using black actors, some like Evelyn Prier from the Lafayette Players, instead of corked up whites. And by the early 30s, a raft of prominent black stage comedians, like their musician counterparts, were allowed access to Hollywood films. For some of the old guard, among them Spencer Williams, Buck and Bubbles, Stephen Fetchin, Miller and Lyles, Matten Moreland and Billy Robinson, as well as a host of newcomers. It was a godsend, albeit in many instances a double-edged one. But conspicuously absent from the list of there were three giants of black comedy: Moms Mabley, Pig Meat Markham, and Tim Moore. After a career that began in tent and variety shows, Mom Mabley did appear on stage in several musical comedies in the 20s and the 30s. Among them were Miss Bandana in 1927, produced by Clarence Muse, and Fast and Furious in 1931, which also starred Tim Moore, Dusty Fletcher, a black circuit comic whose open the door Richard routine was famous in black theaters and became a hit novelty record recording in the 30s. And Zora Neale Hurston, the the ubiquitous Harlem Renaissance writer, humorist, and folklore collector. But Mabley was shunned by film producers until the 40s. Even then, her initial film critics were confined to several race movies, independently produced films intended for black audiences, such as Big Timers in 1945 with Stephen Fetchit, and then Killer Diller in 1948 with Butterfly McQueen and Dusty Fletcher, and Boarding House Blues in 1948 with Dusty Fletcher and John Lee. Now, in April of 1967, she appeared on the Harry Belafonte television special, A Time for Laughter on ABC, with, among others, Pig Meat Markham. She did not appear in Hollywood film until 1974, when she starred in Amazing Grace. This film, the creation of a black producer slash writer Matt Robinson and director Sam Lutham, also starred Stephen Fetchit, Butterfly McQueen, and Slappy White, and was released by United Artists. Mom's homespun humor, as we all shall see, was aggressively irreverent before impious or disdainful African American comedy was considered either fashionable or tolerable. Her brand of humor was therefore probably too risky, perhaps even risque, for Hollywood's early sound films. Now, Duane Pig Meat Markham, although his typically broad, low comedy seems in retrospect perfectly suited for the type of films produced in Hollywood at that time, was also mysteriously ignored by the major studios. Instead, he became something of a legend on the black stage circuit, seldom veering from the burnt cork makeup and burlesque humor that had become his trademark by the 20s and the 30s. During this time, he also appeared with the Andrews sisters as Alamo a cook on their stage and radio shows. In the 40s, he starred in a series of independent black films with such performers as Noble Sissel, Nina Mae McKinney, and his frequent screen partner, John Rastus Moray. His scarred darky routine and numerous burlesque blackout skits predominated. Among those films were Mr. Smith Goes Ghost, Shut My Big Mouth, and One Big Mistake, House Rent Party, and Fight That Ghost. With the advent of television in the late 40s, he had several guest shots on the Ed Sullivan's Toast of the Town variety show. And in 1968, after Sammis Davis Jr. used his classic Here Come the Judge bit on Rowan and Martin Laughs In, Pigmeat was discovered and gained belated recognition as a master comic of the old school. At age 12, Tim Moore ran away from home and joined the medicine show as a singer and a dancer. Then, teaming up with Romeo Washburn, he appeared as one of the original Gold Dust Twins in a traveling pickaninny act. He quit the stage for a time, experimenting with careers in boxing and horse racing while in his teens, but returned to unveil a one-man version of Uncle Tom's Cabin, performing with half his face made up in white chalk as Simon Legree and the other half with burnt cork as Uncle Tom. Later, after retiring from boxing, he developed the vaudeville act, and by the early 20s had become a star attraction on the TOBA circuit. He also appeared in one of the early black cast silent Hollywood movies, Ben Strausser's His Great Chance. Moore had a featured comic role in the Lou Leslie Broadway hit Blackbirds of 1928, which debuted at about the time sound films were initially released, but was still ignored in Hollywood. Instead, during the 30s and 40s, he continued working with black theater circuits, starred in some independently produced black films, appeared occasionally in Broadway shows such as Fast and Furious, Blackberries, and Harlem Scandals, and like Pigmeat Markham, was sometimes seen on the Ed Sullivan's television variety show. It was not until 1951, however, that Moore's comic genius was fully revealed in the role of Kingfish Stevens of the Kingfish Stevens on the Amos and Andy show. He vaulted from relative obscurity in the black theater underground to become one of the best known entertainers in America. He soon found that celebrity as a black comedian had mixed blessings. Now, Stephen Fetching, who was among the first of the seasoned variety show and black circuit comedians to receive featured billing in sound films, had discovered this much earlier. His first film was in Old Kentucky in 1927, and immediately his dilatory style captivated mainstream movie audiences. Variety reported that the MGM finish and a colored comedian hold up the picture. He's just a lazy, no good roustabout, wheedling money out of colored help, but he's no mean pantomimist. Pantomimist. He's no mean pantomimist. Pantomimist. I think it's pantomimist. Let's look it up. Pantomimist. 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 I think that's what it is. Pantomimist. Pantomimist. An actor who communicates entirely by gestures and facial expressions. Synonyms is a mime, a mimer, a mummer, a pantomimer. How do you do pronunciation? Pronounce. I don't know what that sucker shit. Let's see if it's in there. Pantomimers. Mm. Oh shit, it's not in here to be pronounced. Yeah, I don't want to have to go through all that. I think I'm going to have to go through to find it. Fetch's performance as a malingering stable hand and the romantic interest for former Cotton Club chorus line beauty Caroline Snowden established him as a legitimate film personality. The serious treatment of their romance, incidentally, was a breakthrough in Hollywood's representation of blacks in film. Although many blacks had appeared in films before him, Fetchin may have been the first black actor in a non-musical performance who inevitably stamped his own unique stage routine onto the essentially dramatic movie role. According to a relative, Fetchin, who was appearing on stage in Los Angeles when MGM announced they were looking for a colored boy for a film role, may have won the part because he took his stage act directly to the audition. He said, he just stood there looking like he didn't know where he was or why he was there, and he was scratching his head, which he had shaved clean, and he was just looking around like he was lost. I guess he looked so sad and lost in everyone that he got their attention. So, one of the directors, he pointed to Step and he said, "Say you." And Step, he looked all around the place, acting like he thought they couldn't have been talking to him, but knowing all the time that they were. And they called him again. He turned around all slow and wide eyed and pointed to himself and said, "Is you talking to me?" And the dumber he acted, the more they laughed, because nobody had ever seen anybody that slow and ignorant. So they told him that he had the part. Fetchin got the part and a 6-month contract. After moving to Fox Studios, he became the first black actor to sign an extended contract with Hollywood studios. As he insistently claimed, he was the first black movie star. In addition to riches and fame, however, history would capriciously cast him as the symbol of Hollywood's perverse manipulation of the black image on screen. By 30s, when Negro servants became the screen predominant black stereotypes, Stephen Fetchin, the man, as well as the name and character, would emerge as the personification of that caricature for many. Shortly after Stephen Fetchin moved on to such sound films as Salute in 1929 and the groundbreaking Hearts and Dixie for Fox, musical comedy stars Florence Miller and Aubrey Lyles were introduced in movies. Their two first films, Jimtown Speakeasy and the Mayor of Jimtown, both released around 1929, were musical shorts loosely based on their Broadway hit, Shuffle Along. As in that show, the comedy was based largely on ridiculing urban black behavior and left much to be desired. According to Thomas Cript, Jimtown Speakeasy opened on a boy dancing in a black club with accompanying dialogue describing a pickaninny during the Charleston. The movie includes the team's famous emulsifier and revision bit, and is peppered with mispronunciations like condiculous, ignorancer, and that lady renounced dinner. Similarly, the mayor of Gemtown, although it does include the team's signature boxing routine, bristles with the kind of inane caricature that had in depth the mayoral candidates as chicken stealing scallywags, one of whom was unable to spell the word cat. Hmm. After the videograph released the equally unimpressive Midnight Lodge in 1930, in which the pair weave comedy and music around a plot centered on the lodge officer's attempt to conceal his theft of the organization funds, Aubrey Lyles became seriously ill. He died in 1932 as the team was about to begin rehearsals for the Broadway revival of Shuffle Along. In that same year, Miller, as we saw earlier, appeared with Manton Moreland in That's the Spirit, a musical comedy short that cast them as incompetent security guards who are petrified by ghosts. Subsequently, Miller teamed up with comedians such as Moreland and Johnny Lee both on stage and in a series of independent films primarily intended for black theaters and black audiences. The debut of Millers and Lyles as comic performers in Hollywood films had been at best disappointing. When this talented team introduced what they called muddling, mutilating, the language in the early 1900s, it was a fresh and, in some quarters, welcome addition to the black comic idiom. But times had changed, and what had been innovative was becoming hackneyed, familiar, and offensive, as literary humorists such as Cohen, Means, and Wiley, as well as white theatrical impersonators, began using similar styles. By the beginning of the 30s, not only had the Cohen and Wiley stories been adapted for the screen, but movies such as Check and Double Check and Morin and Max, Why Bring That Up in 1929, and Anybody's War in 1930 had been released, and Amos and Andy were popular fixtures on radio. Mutilating the language had quite simply become an accepted mainstream idiom used to satirize and ridicule Black life. Similarly, many of the gags originated by Miller and Lyles and performed before Black audiences had been transformed when introduced into the larger culture. What had seemed comparatively innocent jabs at the behavior of uneducated urban Blacks struggling to overcome their rural backgrounds through overexposure, shifts in emphasis, and invidious juxtaposition with proper mainstream values and mores had now changed for most of white society to racial slurs confirming the incompetence of Blacks. In this atmosphere, the humor of these pioneer funnymen, despite any nuances they may have added, must have seemed compromised. In fact, it can reasonably be assumed that Miller and Lyles at some point began being influenced by their imitators. The satirizing of urban Black life had become so popular, its origins so convoluted, that pinpointing the original source today proves almost impossible. While contending that Gosden and Carell borrowed their Amos and Andy routine from Miller and Lyles, for instance, Red Fox and Norma Miller confirmed that the routines were practically identical. They quote Mark Hellinger of the Chicago Daily Mirror, who in 1930 wrote of Gosden and Carell. They're two boys who are cashing in heavily on something Miller and Lyles originated years ago. If Miller and Lyles were substituted for Amos and Andy one night, I would defy anyone could tell me the difference. I would defy. I don't even sound like. And in an article on Black theater, Langston Hughes wrote, Miller and Lyles imitated the white performers Moran and Mack so well that the white actors who played Amos and Andy in turn imitated Miller and Lyles. Then Rochester imitated all of them put together. But while it is unlikely that Miller and Lyles copied Moran and Mack, the two Black Crows surfaced after Miller and Lyles created their earliest stage comedies. It is quite possible that Gosden and Carell imitated Moran and Mack, who, given the racial priorities of the time, were far better than Miller and Lyles. Although Matin Moreland often teamed with Florence E. Miller on stage and screen and was undoubtedly influenced by him, he quickly developed his own distinct comic presence. Born in Louisiana around 1900, he joined the circus at age 14 and later toured briefly with a minstrel troupe. And according to H.T. Sampson, his comic genius began to surface when he played second comedian to Tom Moore and Flournoy Miller in such shows as Corny's Connie's in Frolics of 1927 and Blackbirds of 1928, 1930, and 1932. After his film debut with Miller and Noble Sissel in That's the Spirit, however, Moreland went on to appear in over 300 movies, more than any other Black entertainer, comic or otherwise. By the time he played a supporting role in The Spirit of Youth in 1937, a Black cast film about the ascent of a poor boxer, which was written and produced by whites and starred heavyweight champion Joe Louis, Moreland had apparently molded the comic persona that made him one of the most durable and arresting Black entertainers of his time. Like Ernie Morrison of Our Game and the East Side Kids, Moreland was noted for his accelerated double takes, gigantic rolling eyes, and boyish elasticity of his face. But he surpassed Morrison and most others in the subtle use of these devices. He was a masterful actor. His facial expressions, in fact, were so vivid and striking, instantly registering fear or joy, lechery or consternation, that even without a word of dialogue, he invariably stole scenes from the most charismatic performers. He also developed signature lines. Feet don't fail me now. That sounds like something I've heard before. Feet don't fail me now. And demanding physical routines and gestures, running full gait while standing in place, or conveying utter bafflement by simply shrugging his shoulders that perfectly complemented his comic expressions, even in the most inane, insignificant roles, which he usually got while he was on camera. It was nearly impossible to watch anyone else. Damn. This talent quickly made Moreland a Hollywood bulwark as a comic foil and supportive attraction in a host of otherwise forgettable movies. He appeared in minor roles in the late 30s with stars such as Lucille Ball, but after appearing as Frankie Darrow's sidekick in the comic Monogram picture series about an inept sleuth, his screen fate was apparently sealed. Although his roles occasionally varied, the specific niche that he carved out was in light comic mystery films. His most famous role was a Birmingham Brown, Charlie Chan's chauffeur and valet in the Monogram mystery series that starred Sidney Toler and later Roland Winters. During the 40s, Moreland was an ubiquitous presence on the screen, portraying the frightened coon retainer more frequently and one might add, with more panache than any other actor. Now, Billy Bojangles Robinson had entered show business before Stephen Fetching or Matt Moreland, although recognition in his films came more slowly. Still, prior to his early major studio film appearance in radio pictures, Old Southern Melodrama, Dixiana in 1930s, where he had a minor role as a dancer, he had established himself as a premier stage performer. Now, born in 1878 in Richmond, Virginia, he was forced to support himself at an early age. During his teens, he danced on street corners in Richmond and, by the mid 1890s, was performing in bars, carnivals, and traveling tent shows, including the South before the War Minstrel Company. But according to Tom Fletcher, Robinson's dancing had not stirred any real attention until about 1900, when he entered a dance contest again at the Bijou Theater in Brooklyn and won in a competitive field that included some of the best white dancers of the era. Later, he teamed up with George Cooper. Robinson went on to become a headliner on the TOBA tour as well as the Keith Vaudeville circuit. Although he did not drink or smoke, from the time he arrived in New York, Robinson was habitué, a habitué, Habitu with the E with the little slash on it. Habitué, habitué. I think that's how you pronounce it. A habitué of the city's numerous professionals or sporting clubs. Let's see what it is. A habitué, habitué, habitué.
Habitué.
Habitué. I was off. Habitué. A resident of or frequent visitor to a particular place. A habitué. Although he did not drink or smoke, from the time he arrived in New York, Robinson was a resident or a frequent visitor of the particular place or a habitué of the city's numerous professional and or sports clubs. After hours spots that After hour spots that became hangouts where performers and celebrities gathered for entertainment, libation, and gambling. In these arenas, Robinson was known as something of a ranconneur. His humorous stories and colorful language delighted his peers. For instance, he was credited with coining terms as capacitic, meaning excellent, first rate, or in the 90s vernacular, chill, which became popular during the 20s. Gradually, his stories became part of his stage act, inserted between numbers or after the finale. One of his favorites concerned a private named Simpson, whose superior officer tells him to prepare for a hike. Hi, Simpson. I want you to pack up all this gear. Pick up your rifle. Get all these knapsacks and canteens to carry on the first 50-mile hike. The private answers in a disbelieving, quivering voice. Lieutenant, sir, did you call me? Do you know my name? The lieutenant answers. Simpson. I said Simpson. The private responds. Oh, I thought you said Samson. Although the story seems only mildly humorous today, it illustrates the kind of comedy that Robinson combined with his dance routine. Moreover, it is an example of stage comedy by a black performer that contrasts markedly with the mainstream entertainment by the usually offered, my bad, period. By the early 20s, billed as the world's greatest tap dancer, Robinson was performing as a single at the mecca of the vaudeville theaters, the New York's Palace. despite appearances in several black cast musical shorts like Hello Bill in 1929 and Harlem is Heaven in 1933 with Yuba Blake Orchestra and the veteran comedian John Mason, aka Spider Bruce, and King for a Day in 1934 with Dusty Fletcher. He did not blossom as a major studio commodity until he was teamed with Shirley Temple in The Little Colonel in 1935. That was the first of his series of films that cast Robinson as a loyal, self-effacing Tom dutiful serving his masters and employers. Even when restricted by stock roles, however, Robinson brought aspects of his stage panache to the parts. In The Little Colonel, for example, as Walker the houseboy, he is regularly insulted and berated by Lionel Barrymore, the Southern patriarch. Robinson stoically accepts the abuse, but he does display some of the savior for fair, the savoir faire, and charm that made him a stage legend in other scenes. He is chipper and effervescent as he playfully jibes with Hattie when the pair attempts to conceal some bad news from Shirley by spelling instead of speaking. They manage to misspell every word. Money becomes MONIE, food becomes FUDE, and loan becomes LONE. When McDaniel spells POHOS, even Robinson is perplexed, and she scolds. Ain't you got no education? The Foo House, Depu House. Ain't you got no education? The Pooh House. The Pooh House. Only once in the movie is the spark of resistance that dances behind Robinson's eyes affirmed through dialogue with Barrymore. That occurs after the patriarch admits that he is an old fool. Instead of delivering his stoic, yes, sir, Robinson flashes a broad smile and walking away intones, yes, sir. Robinson, although one of the most beloved black entertainers, is still something of an enigma in the history of black comedy and entertainment. While he was noted for his charitable work and efforts to advance black participation in the entertainment world, there was a darker, less engaging side to his personality. Some, for example, maintain that the nickname Bojangles was acquired because of Robinson's Robinson's belligerent temperament. That sounds better. His knack for bringing on elements of discord and tension to encounters with other performers. His clash with black entertainers are legendary. According to Lena Horne's daughter, Gail Lumet Buckley, he was in real life one of the biggest Uncle Toms in show business. Of her mother's experience with Robinson on the set of Stormy Weather, Buckley wrote, as far as Lena was concerned, nothing could make up for Bill Robinson. He carried a revolver, was poisonous to other blacks, and truly believed in the wit and wisdom of little Shirley Temple. Now, Honey Coles, the talented tap dancer and all-around entertainer, who in the 50s and 60s was stage manager of the Apollo Theater before his career was rejuvenated when tap was rediscovered in the 70s, came to New York in the early 30s. I wonder, I wonder if that's the Sandman they talking about. Honey Coles. H-O. No, let me look him up. Honicoles. Honey Coles. Let me see if he's in this. The Encyclopedia of African American Heritage. Honey Coles. Let's see if he's in there. H-O. I know I felt something. Nope, he's not in here. No, he's not in here. Let me look him up. I'll look him up on here. Let's see if he is. Honey Coles. I wonder if that's the same man. It might be him. I don't know. Honey Coles, an American actor and tap dancer who was inducted uh, posthumous, posthumously into the American Tap Dance Hall of Fame in 2003. He had a distinctive personal style that required technical precision, high speed tapping, and a close to the floor style where the legs and feet did the work. Honey Coles. Is he the Sandman? Let me go. Is Honey Coles the Sandman? Who is the Sandman on him or on Apollo? Howard Sandman Sims. And I guess it wasn't him. He must have came after Honey Coles. Ooh. Honey Coles, the talented tap dancer and all-around entertainer, who in the 50s and 60s was stage manager of the Apollo Theater before his career was rejuvenated when the tap was rediscovered in the 70s, came to New York in the early 30s. He knew he knew Robinson from about the time of his Hollywood success until his death. An, an ardent admirer, both as a friend and artist, even he confirmed Robinson's sometimes puzzling and erratic nature. Bo was a very complex person. Coles recalled proud, the soul of generosity, but a card player, a pool room man. He'd give you anything, anything under the sun, but he'd have to tell everybody. He had that kind of ego. It's too bad that nobody knew him who could dig into him so psychologically and find out what made him tick. Coles related a few anecdotes illustrating Robinson's conflicting personality. At a benefit show in Louisville, Kentucky during World War II, Robinson saw one of the white stagehands annoying a black showgirl. After the performance, Robinson forced the crew to remain and read the riot act to them, pointing out that if a black performer had touched a white woman, someone would have tried to lynch him. On the other hand, Robinson was fiercely possessive about the star dance he claimed he originated. At Lafayette Theater, on one occasion, he walked right down the aisle and stopped a dance team in the middle of their performance. That's my dance, he shouted. You don't have the right to perform it. He stopped everybody from doing it, Cole said. And when the Harlem-based black newspaper, the New York Age, ran a story calling him an Uncle Tom, he was quick to react. The whole thing was derogatory, and he was furious. Coles recalled. He called me late that evening, saying, "Come on with me." At the time, the age of the 131st Street between 7th and 8th Avenues, and he went down there ready to kill somebody. Luckily, nobody was there except a little frightened man running the presses, so nothing happened. His pride was intense. He was just a misunderstood man most of his life. Robinson's childhood hardships, combined with Hollywood's second-class treatment of even the most brilliant black entertainers, offered the partial explanation for his irascible nature. Let's see what that is. Irascible. IRASCIBLE. I think it's irascible. Like a rascal. Irascible.
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 I hate when you see words and then one of the letters is silent. Irascible, having or showing a tendency to be easily angered, an irascible man. Robinson's childhood hardships, combined with Hollywood's second-class treatment of even the most brilliant black entertainers, offer a partial explanation for his showing the tendency to be easily angered, his irascible nature. The rigid limitations faced by black performers are highlighted when Robinson's film roles are compared with those of Fred Astaire, who shared vaudeville bills with Robinson in the early 20s. Astaire, who admired Robinson, was usually cast as a debonair bon vivant, while Robinson, equally stylish and polished on stage, was shunted into humble, old South servant roles in which his renowned dancing was almost often overshadowed by insistent Uncle Tom characterizations. In their age, the difference in roles can be partly justified by the difference in their ages. Robinson was 21 years older than Astaire. When he appeared opposite Lena Horne in Stormy Weather, he was 65. Still, despite public silence on his film image, Robinson was, as Cole affirms, a proud, even arrogant man, and the inherent degradation of the roles he played must have gnawed at him. Although blacks found his screen image somewhat less offensive than that of Fetchin, Moreland, and others, the parts he usually played perfectly fit the obsequious niche that Hollywood had reserved for African Americans in films. And that was section 3. Section 3 of chapter 6. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's going to be 5 pages for section 4. That Honey Coles, that's a very interesting part for me. That Honey Coles. You know, I thought that would have been kind of interesting if it would have been the Sandman, but he still played part in Apollo, and you know, it's most likely where the Sandman. You know, I can speculate. It's probably where the Sandman came in, trying to reiterate the things that Honey Cole did while he was up there. Most likely, I could imagine that happening. But you know, so far so good. We are moving along. That was section 3 of chapter 6. We're still not halfway through the book, man. We are still not halfway through the book, but we got a big chunk. Out of that. We getting there. I think about chapter 8. Yeah, I think by chapter 8 or by chapter 9. Let me me see. Well, this is chapter 8 right here coming up. Yeah, it's chapter 8. What page am I on? 234. Yep. I'm going to say by chapter 8. By chapter 8, we'll be halfway through the book. So we got at least one more chapter. One more chapter to go, chapter 7. We'll be halfway through the book at that point. But before we even get to chapter 7, we have section 4, section 5, and section 6 to read of chapter 6. This will be the longest chapter so far, at least by section. It'll be the longest chapter so far. But so far, so good. I still stumbled over some words, but I was reading pretty nicely for me tonight. Some of the words. Habitate. But that is what it is, man. I appreciate you, spiritual conversations, for rocking with me, staying in the pocket. Hopefully, we'll keep growing, and many others can do the same. And it can be definitely some good dialogue back and forth about the books that have been read and the things that you as a person may have gathered from the book, the things that you may learn from the book to help push you forward, or just help you open your mind a little bit more. Hopefully, we'll keep growing. We'll keep going, and we'll keep growing. We'll see how that goes. One word at a time, one page at a time, one section at a time, one chapter at a time, till we finish this book line for line. Or finish the books. Yeah, but hey, that's why you got to rent spiritual conversations. That's why you got to rent. First and only wrench. Rent holder. But as I keep growing, I'll probably need you as a wrench holder to come through and moderate. But we'll have to work that out. We'll have to see how that goes as I keep as things keep escalating, Lord willing. I have to do some research on that and see what all goes into this moderating thing if I ever get to that point to where once I get to that point, where a lot of people is watching the readings, I'll probably need somebody to moderate. So we'll see. Yeah, keep them in the pocket. Make sure they where they need to be. Shut up. I'm gonna kick you out. They talking crazy, kick them out. Whatever. Yeah, but we'll get there. Lord spare life. We'll get there, and I'll definitely speak with you more on a personal level by that time, so that way we can get this stuff together. But man, till next time, we'll come back with section 4 of On the Real Side, chapter 6, by Mel Watkins, a history of African American comedy from slavery to Chris Rock. Man, look at that boy. Get out your nose, Richard. Get out your nose. But so far still good. I'm hoping the second half of the book is some comedy stuff for real. Don't get me wrong. It's good to get all this info. It's just a lot of info. It's just a lot of info. Like books like this, you need to take notes on, notes and notes upon notes upon notes. There's so many things. I'm just looking at words, man. Is so much research that can be done off this book. Man, what are some of the minstrel shows? If you could catch some of the old two-reelers they were talking about, I would love to see some of those, but I'd probably get mad. But, I would love to see some of those. It's a lot of older, I'm pretty sure it's black and white movies. A lot of old black and white movies and silent movies that I know I have not seen that I would like to see if I find them funny today. when it got to the point of the not the Three Stooges, but Little Rascals, those I have seen, and probably a lot of them. But yeah, I really want to know who Steppin' Fetchin' is. I want to know who he is. So it's a lot of research that can be done, you know, based off of this, based off of just this one book. We could go movie for movie, and damn do reactions. We go movie for movie and do reactions on some of the movies that maybe are still in existence. I have to research them and see where can I find them. Maybe some of them was on Tubi or something like that for free. You know, I know they have. As we're gonna get further along in the book, they're gonna most likely start talking about Red Fox and Sanford and Son. So definitely, definitely something that they're probably going to talk about. Definitely something I can check out. Three Stooges, The Rascals. I saw Amos and Andy the other night when I was looking through some of the old black and white films. Uh, but because of the how society is trying to cancel a lot of things today, some of these old videos and old movies might not be around too much longer, or they're going to put them in a way where just like some of the old books, it's going to cost an arm and a leg to be able to get your hands on this. Because some of that stuff is some of that stuff society doesn't want you to see that they were once like that, and probably still are in many occasions. They don't want you to be able to connect the dots. Oh, y'all was doing that then. Oh, I see y'all still doing the same thing nowadays. So like many books, I know it's many books that have a lot of good info in it. Man, it's $1,000 books, thousands upon $1,000 books to have nothing but information in it. Good information. That'll have you looking at a lot of things a lot differently. So and once they get up to that, boy, ooh wee, I'm gonna need some government funding to read books. Man, yeah, to read books are, man, I would love to have a lot. I've always wanted a big library of books, but man, it's like shit. One where I'm gonna put, I plan on filling this whole wall up. At one point, I'm gonna have to build some more bookshelves and uh, fill fill the whole wall up with books. It's gonna really be. I really want it to be like a library in here. So or in whatever area that I end up having, whatever's the final area that my library is gonna lie at. I really want to fill it up from the ceiling to the floor. Um, Old maps. That's something I've been interested in now. Or I've been looking at old maps. I want to see a bunch of old maps along with a bunch of old articles, and I think reading a lot of the history. I'll be kind of oh yeah, oh yeah. I know at some point, what goes around comes around, and it was a time when people were burning books because they didn't want you to learn stuff. I think it's going to come a time they're going to do the same thing. I think there's going to come a time where they're going to be burning books once again and trying to get rid of the knowledge so that way they can force down whatever they want to teach you. Only this, only that. The same way when they burned down Alexandria, the Library of Alexandria in Egypt, the same way they burned that down and some other stuff. I bet the books that they had is there. Oh, I would have loved to walk into that library. Just man, man. And these are things I wish I could have images of. You know, images of what the Library of Alexandria might have looked like. But yeah, we'll keep building, and we are building. We are building one book at a time. We are building. Uh, I just got to keep doing my thing. I'll be hitting up thrift stores, um, I need to hit up some garage sales. A lot of people give away, or a lot of good books for nothing, living nothing. Um, the library down here gives away books. So I have books here that I got free from the library, and I'll continue to do that. Books that I think that, like you say, are interesting to me, or my history, a history book for me, or history books catalog for myself. I pick up what I think would be valuable, whether or not to me right now, maybe later on, or even to my children, to my sons. Maybe it's something that I could get that may help them a little later. But we'll see. We'll keep building. We'll keep building till Shiloh's library is complete. Oh yeah, till it's complete. Yeah, but man, once again, wonderful rocking with you tonight. Let's keep pushing till we finish the book of On the Real Side, and then on to the next one. On to the next one. Shalom. Have a nice night, day, evening, whenever you get and sit back and watch this. For those that catch it later, man, like, comment, subscribe, tell your people. And let's turn this reading needle, from a little bit listening to a lot. Yeah. Shalom. Shalom.